It's really interesting that you say I studied nursing, because a lot of people assume that that is my background, but it's actually not. So I did sort of grow up in hospitals. I did a Bachelor of Health Administration straight from school and went into a management training program. So basically I had the privilege of working in the corridors of hospitals for over 30 years. So a lot of people do assume that I have a nursing background. But I was really lucky early on to have a mentor who pushed me to make sure that I got into theatre scrubs and went into theatre and really understood the environment in which I ultimately became a leader. But at the time, I think the management training program was wonderful, because there's very few opportunities in your career where you get to change roles every 3 or 6 months without losing your credibility. And it also provided the opportunity to, because I was moving locations as well as different parts of hospitals, and even into New South Wales Health back at the time in a regional office. So it allowed me to build a reputation very quickly as well. That was with the Australian College of Health Service Management, and New South Wales Health ran a graduate training program, and they still do. In fact, it's 45 years. It's just celebrating 45 years this year. So very proudly a graduate of that program. Often when I reflect on my career, I do reflect on being lucky. Lucky that I've had opportunities put in front of me, and then lucky that I had mentors or people who said, where I might have been hesitant and said, oh no, I couldn't do that, I haven't done that before. I've had people push me and so say, yep, give it a go. I've been really lucky to have the family support that I have. So I have a husband and 2 boys, and they've supported me to go and do a stint in Queensland for nearly 5 years, to do a stint in Victoria for 7 years. So, that ability to move to where the opportunities are, I think is also, has been, very, very lucky for me as well, that I was able to do that, because not everybody can. Yeah, the commute thing I think is doable. I did the last role I had where my office was in Melbourne, but the hospitals I was associated with were across both states of New South Wales, so my family home was still in Sydney. So the commute was doable, but ultimately it takes a bit of a toll. It is just the equivalent of a bus ride. It's very short, but it is still that sort of, you end up with very long weeks, I think, when you're away and you're sort of coming home for the weekend. You end up sort of working yourself into the ground if you're not really careful. Well, at Uniting, what we say is that our people are at the heart of everything that we do. So we have, over 500 buildings scattered all over the state. We're a very large provider of aged and community services in a whole range of venues, as I said, literally across the state of New South Wales and into ACT. So having our people at the heart is really important. And I suppose how we motivate them is by trying to create the culture in which they're swimming around in doing their work. Is a culture that embraces diversity, a culture that values what they do, a culture that really tries to help them to grow, not just have 10 years experience with Uniting where you do 1 year, 10 years over, but rather that opportunity to grow. And that can be quite difficult. In our aged care services, for example, there's not a lot of career opportunities. But if we find someone who might start with us as a personal care worker and have a journey or an ambition of actually having a journey through the ranks, perhaps into registered nurse ultimately, those sorts of things are something that we really try hard to support as well. But I think the motivation, a lot of it at Uniting comes from within. So our values include compassion and respect, and people are drawn, I think, to coming to an environment where they can be caring for others. So there's a lot of intrinsic motivation at play as well. And then I think the other final thing I'd say would be about recognition. So we have a lovely program running at the moment which is called our Excellence Awards, where for several months people are able to nominate a peer or a boss or a colleague or a volunteer. And when we have the celebrations where we call out this nomination process and we sort of pick the top winners, which is very difficult because last year we had over 900 nominations, but we go around to the different regions and actually celebrate that. So the recognition piece, I think you just can't do enough of it in any form. Absolutely. Somebody said to me, they showed me a clever cartoon that said, who's driving the digital transformation in your organisation, the CEO, the CIO, or COVID-19? And COVID-19 absolutely has driven our adoption of particularly that we use Teams or Zoom, but that ability to just call up our 70 service managers and have a conversation with them because we're about to change the policy on visitation or we're about to update them, or we just want to touch base with them because they have been doing the hardest job in Australia, if you ask me. Those service managers who are leading our aged care services, so difficult through COVID. So the fact that we can use this technology, even though we're disconnected physically, the ability to actually just very quickly, efficiently engage with people has been fantastic. But of course there's other pieces of technology that we're looking at which are more around supporting our clients and putting more control into the hands of our clients, those sorts of things as well. But there's no question that COVID has forced an escalation of reform that we were hoping for, but in ways way beyond our expectations in 2020. Hopefully the impact of the Royal Commission will be really significant. I think COVID-19 has done the job of raising the awareness within the general community of Australia that the aged care system is not working. So it's shone a light on that and it's raised people's concern. And I think in the past when reviews have been done, there's been a sort of a fleeting acknowledgement of that, but there's not been the determination to see it through and make real change. I think now that we've got a Royal Commission that's going to make recommendations about really significant reform, hopefully there will be an appetite to act on that and that the community will sort of keep the pressure on us all to stay on that, because it's going to be hard work. There's a lot of reform to be done, but we need to take the system from where it is today to where it needs to be in order for older people to get the support that they deserve, wherever they deserve, in their home, in one of our homes, so that they can live a meaningful life. So at the moment, the sector really is struggling to do that. I hope to see an abundance of changes. The focus onto home care so that people can be supported to stay in their home, the focus on being able to pay our staff more, train our staff more, have more staff available so that people get more engagement and more care in the residential setting. I hope that the transparency and accountability mechanisms are put in place so that people can have more confidence. Clearly we've lost, there's been a loss of confidence, so we're very committed to transparency. And for all of the wonderful sort of new vision that the Royal Commission is painting a picture of, there is a reality that we're going to have to pay for it. At the moment we're spending 1% of GDP, 1.1% of GDP on aged care. And in countries like Denmark and Sweden, where they're proud of their aged care system, they are spending at least 3 times that. So unfortunately, what we want won't come without cost. So what we need is for Australians who can afford to pay, we need them to recognise that it's worth paying for aged care. We can't let it all fall to the taxpayer, or unfortunately it will continue to be rationed and be a substandard service. What we need is for the government and the taxpayer to be making sure that no one slips through the cracks, that people who don't have means have got access to good care. But for those of us who have means, we're going to have to spend some of it as we age. We can't just leave it all to our kids if we're going to have the system that we all hope for and can be proud of in Australia. I think home care is going to be a much bigger part of the future because that's what older Australians want. So we've got to try and make that happen. There'll always be the need for a sort of a congregate living setting. So, particularly in that area of dementia, and even caring for people who are incredibly frail or towards end of life. It's very, very difficult and expensive. So will Australians be willing to spend that much money to make 24/7 support for someone in that sort of acutely frail stage? Not sure. So I'm sure there'll still be a role for aged care facilities. And then there's the opportunity of retirement living as well, which is almost the sort of the midway. So by having older people living together independently in aged care, in retirement villages, for example, the ability for home care to come in and support them it's much more efficient if they are all within a few doors of each other rather than streets or suburbs away from each other. That all comes at a cost as well. So I think there's, and we're very ambitious about having a continuum of support for older people at Uniting. So we already provide home care, we provide residential, and we do retirement living, and we're looking to see how can we actually, make sure that that's a really seamless and cost-effective response to what older people need. We, as part of the Uniting Church, we have a sort of an ambition of welcoming everyone exactly as they are. So diversity and inclusion is part of our DNA. But it doesn't just come by people wanting it to be there. You actually have to put a structured response around it. So just this morning I spent several hours in what we call our Diversity and Inclusion Summit. And using Zoom, we had over 200 people online, really engaging with our strategy that's just been launched and endorsed by our board and indeed by the church. So it has ambitious goals and targets around training, around resources to support people to feel safe. And I think one of the lovely things that was said this morning is that difference, everybody's different. It's just in whatever way. And that difference is actually an asset, because there's a richness in that diversity that you can bring to bear and enhance your service, or if you're operating your business, it enhances your business. There's statistics out there that the evidence is diversity on a board, for example, will lift performance of the organisation. So, but you have to deliberately set about doing it and put goals in place and have action plans to make it happen. I think the number one thing is say yes. So even though you might doubt yourself and think, I could have failed at that, I've never done that, how will I tackle that, do I have time? If you can say yes to those opportunities of being involved in a project, I think that's a really important one. That's where you get to stretch. It's where you get a reputation of being someone who is willing to go above and beyond and contribute as well. I think making sure you're making time for reflective practice is really important as well. So often leaders don't realise the impact that they're having on others, or they might just be rushing into something, and if in fact they sort of stopped and thought, well, last time I met with Wayne, and plan it. So making time for that reflective practice. And then I think another one would be actively seeking feedback. So really making sure that people know that you genuinely are trying to learn and grow, and therefore even though it might be tough love, it might be hard feedback, you really want it because you are on an improvement and a journey. And I think the other one is that someone sort of really pushed me to do some postgraduate study when I was at a sort of particular stage of my career, and I was definitely in a senior position. I was busy with kids, and it was like, how on earth do I find time for it? But I was given a bit of a push to do that. And I ended up doing an MBA over several years. Actually, I took it as a journey rather than a destination, and I'm forever grateful that someone really did give me that nudge, because I think it's really important to have that continued learning, formal or informal, as part of your offering and part of your own leadership growth.